back for another week of Monday Night Football. Let's get straight to it. A couple of very prominent 0-0 draws this weekend, guys. So the opening question for this week is your favourite 0-0 draw of all time. Sarcasm is allowed here. Scott, what you got, mate?
Well, I was scraping the bottom of the barrel to begin with, and I came up with a 0-0 at home to Airdrie when David Abua, the so-called free kick specialist, was ballooning every free kick and penalty at the end of the match. But then I managed to think of a couple of games more for atmosphere. So there was firstly the game at White Hart Lane, 0-0 match where Jimmy McDonald saved Harry Kane's penalty. And then also Helicopter Sunday. We were actually away to Celtic that day, and I was in the few hundred that were gladly gloating at the Celtic fans as Rangers were winning the league. So that was quite a good game for atmosphere, although we did get a bus escort. We did get a police escort back down to the bus afterwards, so that wasn't so welcoming.
Okay, Ross? I shouldn't have sent my answers to Scott before the show. White Hart Lane, absolutely, it was a fantastic. I was quite worse for wear at that game. I went down with my brother and we had an absolute amazing time. It could have been 5-0 to Tottenham again. We wouldn't have we wouldn't have cared. It was a great game. 0-0, and they missed a penalty as well, which made it even better. And they got applauded off the pitch like they'd won. It was just one of those games. It was, after looking back, is a bit cringe, especially with the team that Tottenham had out. But no, it was a great game for us, and we enjoyed it. It was another European trip, and more of them to come, hopefully.
Mikey, from a Hibs perspective,
I managed to eliminate most of them from my memory. The one that I thought I came up with that wasn't a Hibs or Hearts link was the battling performance by Scotland in Tallinn. We got a 0-0 draw after 30 seconds and then put in a further battling performance in Monaco to get a second 0-0 draw. So, proud moments for us all. But in terms of Hibs result, for again atmosphere, standard performance was probably Hibs against Dnipro. 0-0 draw, but it was probably kind of the height of the sort of Mowbray team, if you like, and some of the football they played was absolutely fantastic that night. And hit the post twice. I think Sproul and Brown hit the post. Great standard of football on both sides. Atmosphere's tremendous, and the Dnipro team itself, within the next 18 months, 2 years, a lot of the guys moved on to Kiev and to Donetsk and made up the bulk of the squad that got to the World Cup quarter-finals, I think. So it was less of a scunner when you consider the doing they got in the second leg. They got a bit cheesed off at us having the audacity to equalise and then done us 5-1, so that was put right to bed.
Well, Wales might get their comeuppance from the 0-0 draw against Belgium in the next game against them as well. Let's bring our guest in at this time. Danny Galbraith, are you there?
Yeah, can hear you, yeah.
Danny, first and foremost then, is there a 0-0 draw from your career that you have fond memories of at all?
Well, I was actually trying to rattle my brains as well there when you were going through them and see if you could give me any clues. I suppose the only one I can remember of any great fondness was when we played at Celtic Park. Must have been, I just remember we were wearing the purple strip, that famous purple strip. And we got a 0-0 draw there, and we played well that day, and that was probably the highlight as far as 0-0 draws go for me, I would say.
Okay, well, let's start on the serious stuff then, and we'll kick it off with your current situation before we take you right back to the start of your career. You're currently looking for a club after leaving Limerick in the League of Ireland, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Okay, and can you bring us any news, any current developments, any irons in the fire?
Well, I wish I could bring you really good news, but no, unfortunately, I'm still trying to find the right thing just now. I went to a few clubs in Scotland in the summer, and I had a few opportunities to get a contract there. Then I sort of tried to hedge my bets. I was trying to look for something maybe down south if possible, or abroad. So I've been at a few clubs there, and I ended up in America last month, I think it was. So there's a possibility again I could go over there potentially, but like the League of Ireland, their season also runs through the summer months from like January onwards. So that's something for after the new year potentially, but just now I'm still on the lookout and hopeful to get something sorted soon.
Okay, so regarding Ireland, we've had a lot of questions on Hibs.net for you, particularly here, Danny, but one of them, interview LOI, which is League of Ireland, on .net, asks you if you miss Limerick, and in particular, Robbie Williams.
It must be a bit sarcasm behind that. No, I mean it was good. It was good for me at the time to go away and play games, week in, week out, under a manager that was desperate to have me. I think that was obviously the main reason in me going there. So from that point of view, it was good. I do miss playing week in, week out, but I feel as if going over there served its purpose, and obviously I'm looking to try and move on and start again somewhere else.
Okay, final question on your current situation then. Silver Hybe on Hibs.net asks if there's any truth in the rumour that Hibs tried to re-sign you in the transfer window.
No, not as far as I'm aware of, no. Obviously I've still got a lot of good friends and things there. I'm not sure exactly where that's come from, but no, that was never something that I was aware of really. I was at Hamilton in the summer, and that was one option that I could have taken at the time, like I mentioned before. But no, I never heard that one. So no, unfortunately, I can't give you a yes for that.
Well, we can always kick off a rumour here, though, Danny. Would you be open to the idea of going back?
Well, you never say never. Obviously, there's a lot changed since I was there. For the better, as far as I understand, and from like I said, I've still got a lot of close friends there, and from what I'm hearing, they're trying to do the right things and getting back going in the right direction, and hopefully this is the start of them doing that, because they are a big club, and they shouldn't really be in the position where they are just now.
Okay, so let's get into your background with Edinburgh football then, Danny. You're in quite a unique position in that you played through the youth setup at one of the Edinburgh teams and then in the first team at another.
Yeah.
Your time at Hearts ended quite abruptly when you departed for Man United on your 16th birthday. How did that move come about?
Well, basically, I played at Hutchie Vale in Edinburgh. Obviously, I'm not from Edinburgh. I'm from a small town called Galashiels, so it's about an hour away from Edinburgh, and there wasn't much football there. And I moved to Edinburgh when I was 5 and ended up playing at school with one of my friends who played for Hutchie, and from there I went to Hearts, and obviously I played there for 2 years. In the under 15 and 17 side, and there was just obviously scouts and things used to come to a lot of our games. We had quite a good side at the time, and I was just lucky enough to get the opportunity to move away when I was 16, like you said.
So on the subject then of Man United, I'm sure you get asked it all the time.
Yeah.
What are the big memories of your time down south?
I think probably the standouts in my first year there. We got to the FA Youth Cup final, and we were still in the semi-final. I remember being 16 and we played Arsenal at the Emirates Stadium, which was the first year the Emirates had opened, and it was, I think, still to this day it was a record crowd. It was 38,000 at a youth game, so that was a bit of an eye-opener. And then in the final, with obviously playing at Old Trafford and playing at Anfield, we played Liverpool over 2 legs. So I suppose that was really a highlight at that age, going away and sort of experiencing playing in games like that, and at a club obviously that has great tradition in the Youth Cup, going back over a number of years, and obviously just being around some of the best players in the world at the time, like Sir Ronaldo and Rooney, and seeing how they act and how they perform on a day-to-day basis. Looking back now, you suppose you don't realise how lucky you are at that age. You sort of just try and take it in your stride. But looking back, obviously it was a great experience.
Were there any individuals who were a particularly big influence on you at that stage in your career, Danny? Anyone who took you under their wing or anything?
Tough to probably say Darren Fletcher in that regard, just through being Scottish, I always felt as if, he sort of made a point to look out for me and see how I was doing and things, which obviously I didn't need to do. It was good to have somebody sort of like make you feel welcome. Obviously there wasn't. There was just a couple of Scottish players, myself and David Gray, who's now at Hibs, and Darren Fletcher as well. Other than that, there was a lot of Scottish staff who were obviously good with me as well. But no, he would be the one, simply just because we're obviously from the same country and found ourselves at the same club.
How much interaction do you have as a youth player at that stage of your career with Alex Ferguson?
I would say quite a massive amount. If you were to compare it to a lot of clubs, I think that's sort of one of the things that made the clubs and makes the club now so special. The fact, especially under Ferguson, he made a point to know every boy's name from about under 14s upwards, and their parents' names and members of their family. I remember going down and I'm speaking away to my mum and dad and knowing information that you just sort of you couldn't have imagined. And then especially when it came to the Youth Cup games, he would sometimes call a meeting, even though obviously it was nothing really to do with him, just to sort of hammer home the importance of the Youth Cup to Manchester United, and to hammer home obviously the traditions and the players that have moved into the first team through that avenue. Obviously everyone knows about the Busby Babes, and then obviously Fergie's fledglings, I think they called them, with Giggs and Butt and Scholes and Beckham and the rest of them. So he seemed to really get involved with the youth team in those sort of moments and those occasions. But other than that, you would see him day to day, because unlike a lot of clubs, the first team and the youth team and the reserves, they all eat together at lunchtime, and it's a sort of feeling of togetherness that nobody's sort of above anybody. And I think that was one of the things when I first went down. Just helps you settle in and really makes it a special club in that regard, that you can obviously be down there at 15, 16 and look across the room and you see some of the best players in the world beside you. So yeah, it's definitely unique in that way, I would say.
Well, I have a feeling we may come back to that idea of togetherness when we get to your time at Easter Road, Danny. But for now, your time there ended somewhat blighted by injury before being given the opportunity to come home to Edinburgh and sign for Hibs. How grateful were you for that opportunity at that stage of your career?
Obviously, like you had said, I'd had a bit of a rough time towards the end, and I was really sort of excited at the prospect of coming home. I still kept in touch with the likes of Paul Hanlon at that time, and he was 17, 18 playing in the first team at Hibs, and it really, seeing that, it gets to a point where you want to be playing first team football. Yeah. And at that point the opportunity came to go up and train. I went to Hearts and Hibs, and felt that moving to Hibs was the right move for me at the time, and obviously that's a decision I then made.
Liam Harding on Facebook asks if there was ever any second thought about joining Hibs, given your previous affiliation with Hearts and people that you knew in the Hearts setup there. No, and I mean, it was nothing to do with either club in terms of who they are or where they are. It was purely, from my point of view, what I felt was the best footballing decision. And at the time, the main reason for me going up to Hibs was Donald Park at the time, because he was the assistant manager under Mixru, and Donald Park took me at Scotland under 17s, and I really enjoyed playing under him at that point. And when I got the opportunity to go up and train, I really felt as if it was somebody that sort of knew my background and knew what I could do, and he was probably the main reason at the time why I wanted to sign for Hibs, along with the fact that obviously the manager, Mixu Patalainen at the time, took a liking to me as well. At Hearts, it was the time when Chabo Laszlo was there, and obviously I didn't feel I had that same connection. Obviously, being a foreign coach and things like that, it's understandable. But from me, Hibs always really, like I said about Paul Hanlon earlier, had the reputation of giving young players a chance and playing obviously a
attractive brand of football that they had been known for in previous years with Mowbray and Collins, and I felt purely from a footballing point of view that's where I was going to have the best chance to develop and progress.
Okay, perfect. As I said before then, Danny, we've got loads of questions on your time at Hibs that came in from Hibs.net in particular. But I thought we'd start with probably the biggest moment of your Hibs career, which was the last minute winner against Celtic. What are your memories of that one?
Obviously, it's an amazing memory for me. I know I remember, obviously, it was the first time getting to go to Celtic Park. It's always a fixture you look forward to, along with obviously Rangers and Hearts at the time. Those are the big games, and it was remember it was a Wednesday night. It was actually my dad's birthday, and going through and playing under the lights. I just remember sort of warming up and thinking, obviously, at the time how great it was to sort of be able to test yourself and play in that sort of environment. I just remember coming on, and obviously it was a bit of a blur, and I remember us obviously breaking at the end of the game, and just obviously had one thing on my mind. I think it was John Rankin that played me through. When the ball hits the net, it's just a feeling you can't really describe. I remember obviously running over to the fans, a small section in the corner. It was just a dream come true, especially at the time. I'd only been at Hibs for 6 months, and I was trying my hardest to force my way into the team. It was obviously a night I'll never forget.
Were you disappointed that the momentum from that goal didn't really seem to be harnessed? You then seem to be a wee bit in and out of the team again from the manager. Do you think you should have been given a wee bit more of a run to lead off for that?
100%. I'd say that's obviously one of my biggest disappointments. I think I must be the only person to score the winner at Parkhead and then not be involved for another 2 or 3 months. I mean, I wasn't even in and out. I was nowhere near it. I went from obviously scoring the winner to then I wasn't even in the squad. I wasn't making the bench. But that obviously at the time it was massively frustrating. But I suppose that's just football, and that is one of the things. I felt as if obviously I was on cloud nine. If you're looking to make an impact, obviously, which I was trying to do, they don't get much bigger than that, and it obviously sort of stalled after that for one reason or another. So no, obviously it was a frustrating aspect, but I suppose that's sort of the harsh reality of football and the things you learn from.
Is that something that you bring up with the manager, Danny? Is that something that you felt comfortable going and asking why you weren't in the team at that stage?
No, I personally never felt comfortable doing that. I was never, and I am never, not one to sort of pull somebody, the manager, up. Particularly, obviously, I respect every manager I've worked under. At the end of the day, they're in charge. I would go and ask what I need to do better or what I need to do more to get an opportunity. But at that point, I mean, even though I was a young boy at the time, I was doing everything I possibly could in terms of what the manager was asking of me anyway. So I knew within myself that there was nothing more I could do, and I felt as if it was maybe just sort of trying to maybe teach me a lesson in terms of obviously maybe not to get, I don't know, maybe not to get carried away. I've asked myself this question 100 times over, and I would never know the answer, but like I said, I suppose it's just one of those things that happen in football, and you've got to move on. And at that point, I just tried to keep my head down and keep working hard. And eventually, I think it wasn't until around the March time that I even made the bench again. And then obviously, I came back into the team towards the end of the season. But I suppose also at that time, that was the end of January, and Hibs had signed Alan Gow on loan on the very last day of the window, I think, and I think ultimately that's what probably forced me back the way, looking back now. But I suppose that you've just got to take the rough with the smooth in that regard.
Okay, well that leads us on to by far and away the biggest topic that was brought up when we asked for questions on this, which was managers.
Yeah.
Obviously, there were a few that Hibs went through in your time there.
Yeah.
On the most straightforward question, who was the best to work for, and who was the one that you had the hardest time under?
Again, obviously, if you were to ask me that, maybe a few years ago, I would have said right away probably Colin Calderwood was the best I worked under, simply because he was the one to give me, even though maybe not as much as I like, still he gave me an opportunity to start and to play a few consecutive games. But also, like I spoke about before, under Yogi, I was really frustrated because I felt as if I never got the chance to kick on. And when you're young, you take these things personally. But I mean that's something that I feel as if since I've grown older and looked back on that, maybe he was just trying to do it for my benefit and to maybe protect me a little bit. And even though I wasn't playing as much as I really wanted to under John, I can always remember I was never. I was never unhappy. I used to go in every day, and the training sessions that him and Chipper used to put on were brilliant, and I really enjoyed the training and the way that Yogi wanted to play. He did want people to pass the ball and do the right thing, and he had a great season when you look back. In the first season, obviously getting to Europe, I'm sure a lot of Hibs fans would settle for that now.
Definitely.
And obviously then to go from that has sort of been on the slide since then. But I'm grateful. Obviously John Hughes gave me an opportunity initially anyway. But I enjoyed working under Colin Calderwood because I felt as if he gave me obviously a chance to start games and to string a few games together. And obviously I'm grateful for that as well. I think the worst one everybody could probably guess. So I don't know if I can go into great detail. Obviously, Pat Fenlon was the one that really obviously forced me out the door, and that's football again. And like I said before, you suppose you've just got to take it on the chin and move on.
Okay, well, I was going to leave that till the end, but let's deal with it now, and then we can maybe end on a wee bit more of a positive note. There are a lot of questions that exist surrounding your departure, and Danderhall Hibs on Hibs.net asked specifically why the reasons you left appeared to be kept so secret, and whether you can give us any information on what they actually were.
Well, I suppose the reason for that was the club's decision, and I'm obviously not in a position where I'm allowed to say anything, unfortunately. Again, looking back, that's just sort of things that happen in football. Players come and players go at the time. The manager obviously had his own ideas. I think he brought in around 8 or 9 players on loan at the time, and then we had the disappointment in the cup final, and it sort of just seemed that a couple of us were then sort of made the scapegoat, if you like, and the sort of the rest is history, as they say. Obviously the club moves on, and the players have to move on, and that's just the obviously reality of football, I suppose. It's a harsh game, and you've got to be prepared to take the good times and the bad times.
So in terms of the number of managers that you played under, Danny, did that cause problems in the dressing room? Was there ever a particularly harsh reaction to the departure of any manager?
I don't know if you would call it a sort of a reaction, but it's very hard to find stability. I can only speak for myself, obviously from my point of view. When we went into the second season, in Yogi's second season, I started to play more regularly, and just as I felt I was on the brink, of maybe playing as regularly as I would have liked, obviously Yogi left, and obviously it's hard to see a manager go, especially when we had success the year before. But on top of that, you then, for every player, you have that sort of reality check that you're starting from scratch again. And then a new manager comes in, you sort of get to know his methods and his ways, and particularly at Hibs, it seems that there's been a large turnover of players. I would hate to know the numbers, but there's a lot of players that went out from Yogi's time that Calderwood brought in, and then vice versa when the next manager came in after that. And again, from my point of view, under Calderwood, I was playing near enough every week, and I felt as if I was starting to gain a bit of momentum, and that's all I ever wanted was a fair crack to get a run of games. There was a lot of players that I had to sit and watch that would play consistently week after week, and regardless of sort of how results or performances were going, and I just felt as if I wanted that opportunity as well, and I felt as if that was coming at the time. And then for Calderwood then to leave, from my point of view, it was really frustrating, because then you go back to square one again, and a new manager comes in, and you've got to start the process all over again. And it's hard, when you're obviously fighting for your place, and you get in there, and then all sort of the work you've put in goes out the window because you start from scratch when the new man comes in. So from that point of view, I found it tough, because I felt as if the times when the managers did move on were the times when I was starting to have an impact in terms of my own performances. But again, I suppose that's just something you have to accept that comes part and parcel with football.
How you doing, Danny? I'm going to ask a question that's kind of inspired by Viva Palmeiras off of Hibs.net, but I've got something to ask myself as well. We had Graham Stack on the show a few weeks ago, and he was quite sort of honest in his critique, if you like, of his time under Pat Fenlon, particularly talking about preparations towards some of the big derby matches and trips to Glasgow. Sort of Pat used to talk about them being like any other game. Graham's thoughts were that they were much bigger than that. How did you find the preparations towards those games? But also, how did you feel that they differed under a guy like John Hughes, who's a massive Hibs fan?
Well, I listened to the most part of Graham's interview, and I would have to sort of agree with him near enough 100%. I do feel as if, like you said, John Hughes there, you were left in no uncertain terms how big a game you were going into, and how important it was for the fans. Most importantly, at the end of the day, they're the ones that keep us in a job, and they're the ones that make football what it is. And when you have the chance to go and keep your supporters happy until the next game, it's a big deal, and there's no point hiding away from that fact. I remember, if games never went your way, you'd be scared to walk down the street because you feel as if you let people down. So, I don't think you can disguise the fact that you've got massive derby games and important games ahead, and likes of John Hughes obviously knew all about it. He's obviously been brought up in that culture and left you on no uncertain terms. And like you said, with other managers to sort of get away from it all, like I heard what Graham's views were, and I would have to agree. Maybe going away and sort of, I can understand maybe from a viewpoint of sort of getting out the spotlight, but how many players get the chance to play in a Scottish Cup final against your biggest rivals? If that's not something to sort of take in and really grasp and experience, then I don't know what is. It was sort of clear to everybody else how big the game was and how much it was getting hyped up. I think it is important that you really take it in your stride, and that you go through what the fans are going through in the build up, and when you obviously get out on the pitch for that particular game, that you know exactly the situation and what it means to a number of people.
Taking that subject on, Danny, you touched earlier on your time at Man United and how there was a real sense of togetherness there, and how Alex Ferguson managed everything, from top to bottom.
Yeah.
I think there is a real feeling amongst, to be honest, Scottish football fans in general, but particularly at points over the last couple of years, Hibs fans, that there's maybe certainly a lack of togetherness, but also maybe a lack of professionalism in some individuals involved in Scottish football, and some people maybe think they've made it well before they have. How did you what was your opinions on the differences in standards that people held themselves to between Old Trafford and Easter Road?
I mean, obviously, from a personal point of view, I mean, I'm the sort of person that tries to be as professional as I possibly can, which is probably how I was brought up. Being a young player in Man United, you're obviously taught the ways that what they expect of you at a club like that, and everybody's in under no illusions exactly what it takes to be a professional player, and how you should live your life, and how you should dedicate yourself and be as professional as you can at all times. And there was a difference, definitely. But whether that was going from a sort of youth and reserve team environment to a first team environment, obviously you would have to take that into account as well. You've got players, even international players, and every player is different. I mean, some people, try and be a little bit professional at all times, and some people like to be maybe a bit more relaxed, and I suppose that's just what works for them. But definitely, coming from a club like that, it's drilled into you, and I would say you probably don't get away with a lot of the stuff that maybe more senior professional players do. But again, I suppose that's why the manager is so important, because like you said, they have to oversee everything and make sure everything is how they want it to be.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for your honesty, Danny, and more so for your time. We really appreciate you joining us on the show. Final question I'm going to ask: who was the best player you played with in your time at Hibs?
That's a tough one, because even looking at the Hibs team now, compared to even when in my first season, it was hard to even make the bench then, when you had the likes of obviously Samama and Derek Riordan, example, playing in a similar position to myself. But even obviously Anthony Stokes as well is obviously at Celtic now, doing well. But if I had to pick one, I would probably say Liam Miller. I don't think, especially towards the end, that Hibs fans saw the best of him. Obviously he had probably played at the best level out of any of the players there, and you could tell that, every day in training, and the way he conducted himself in training. He trained well, and especially for the first part in the first season when we did do well, he would have probably been one of the key players. But in terms of overall, I would probably have to go for him, even though there's obviously again some gifted players like Derek, who's probably one of the best finishers I've seen, no matter where I've been. He had a natural ability for that. It's a shame, obviously, like a lot of Hibs fans seem to think that he never maybe made the most of it.
Very interesting, Danny. Thank you very much for your time again, mate. We wish you all the best in finding a new club, and we hope you go on to have many more successes in football.
Thanks very much. Really
Thanks very much for your time, mate.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Well, that's the interview done. Stay with us though on Monday Night Football. We have got all the reaction to the weekend's games, and a preview of a mammoth affair at Tynecastle this weekend. Scott's nodding his head and licking his lips in a rather suggestive fashion. So we're going to go a couple of adverts now, and then we will be back to get right into the weekend's football. Stay with us on Monday Night Football.
Radio Saltaire is a community radio station located in Trinenton, East Lothian. We are looking for presenters and station volunteers of all ages. So if you think you've got what it takes or always wanted to give it a go, we can train you up and give you that opportunity. So please get in touch by emailing info@radiosaltair.org or contact us using the website www.radiosaltair.org, community radio station for Scotland.
And we're back on Monday Night Football. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Let's talk about Hearts. A successful encounter at the Falkirk Stadium at the weekend, Scott. There's been a lot of talk over the last few weeks, admittedly most of it originating from Murray Park, about Hearts' character and if not bottle, then at least wherewithal to cope with the championship title race. With that in mind, how big a marker was stepping up on Saturday to capitalise on Rangers' slip against Alloa?
It was massive. I mean, if you look past the Hearts-Rangers game, even getting a draw now in this match would be a reasonable result. Rangers have still to play at Easter Road and at Palmerston before the next sort of roundy fixtures are finished. So, I mean, it was a massive 3 points, and obviously Rangers dropping the 2 at home to Alloa just showed, just how susceptible they are to pressure. As much as they like to talk about it being the Hearts team that are under it, I think Rangers are now really under the cosh coming up for Saturday's game.
Ross, as a supporter, did you feel pressure after the full-time whistle went at Ibrox, or did you feel encouraged that there was now a real reason to go out and get the 3 points?
I'd be lying if I said I didn't. I mean, as Hearts fans, even as Hibs fans, you'll agree, Mikey, both clubs have been more than guilty of not capitalising on these types of results and teams around us. It seemed that those types of results affected us negatively, in fact, I would say. And the fact that we did capitalise and the players, went out, done their job and came away with the win. You've seen it in their faces when the final whistle went. I mean, the fans were delighted as well. I'll take that any day of the week. I'm very happy with the team, and hopefully those types of feelings can now be a thing in the past. It obviously might be a different story when we get back to the SPL, but
Mikey, when we get back to the SPL, that may come back to haunt them, sure.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I might not be this season, but yeah, in the past we've been guilty of that, absolutely. Hibs as well, but hopefully it's a thing of the past.
Okay, on the game itself then. Now we have to be pretty careful here, not to stray into the territory of building up Saturday's game too early. So specifically on how it affected the game at the Falkirk Stadium, Robbie Nielsen unveiled the new shape that he's been hinting at. What were your thoughts on how it worked on Saturday, Scott?
I think it worked really well, especially in the first half. We pressed the ball really well, and it wasn't a case of Boabin was playing as the attacking midfielder. They were swapping over positions countlessly. There was times, especially for the second goal, it was actually Payardo that was pressing the ball, which caused the Falkirk centre half to sort of sky it up in the air, which eventually dropped to sort of Walker's feet. But it was really good to see, really encouraging, and I think obviously a lot of teams now are playing a different sort of game against us. If you notice the first game of the season, Falkirk and Raith Rovers, I think, thought in the back of their minds, we can match up against Hearts here. We'll go man for man, we'll try and play some football, and we'll actually do okay. And they were both spanked, and you can now see the last 2 games. They're both. I mean, Falkirk probably showed us too much respect in that first half, which their fans were, clearly not happy with. And you could hear them jeering at half time. But yeah, in terms of how Hearts played, I thought first half we were excellent.
Following on from Scott's point there, Ross, it was the proverbial game of two halves. Why was that? I think a lot of Hearts fans seem to think that was Hearts slacking off and thinking the job was done. Is that being disrespectful to Falkirk, who, as Scott says, maybe rethought the game plan and went about it in a different way second half?
Well, I don't think it was as bad as some of the fans were coming out and saying. I still thought we held their own in the second half. I mean, yes, Falkirk did have the goal. I still don't think they deserved the goal, to be honest, over the 90 minutes. And I thought we should have had another goal as well. Yes, there was shaky moments, but I think whatever the manager said was basically, pressure them. They weren't doing that in the first half. I mean, there was one player getting pressured more specifically than anyone else, is Gomez. But the way he plays, he loves that. That's what he's there for. He'll get the ball, hold on to it. 4 Falkirk players will run at him. Then he makes the pass. He doesn't, make a pass straight away.
Yeah.
He seems to make space for players around him.
He's brave enough and confident enough to draw the man before he plays the pass.
He's one of those people that a player's coming up behind them, he'll know before anyone else. He just does a wee flick somewhere, and that's them out of the game. So in terms of the midfield battle, that's where we started losing it in the second half. But I think that was just to do with the fight, really, and there was more kind of harder tackles flying in. The referee as well, he was, a few cards here and there.
Where possible, we try and steer clear of just kind of moaning about referees, but
that was
Callum Murray did have a particularly odd
shocker
occasion on Saturday.
Yeah.
It was a strange game.
If anyone can explain why Brad Mackay got booked, please let us know, because I have no idea.
Even the BBC said the Jamie Walker push one was a penalty as well, so that's when you know it was at least bordering on Stonewall. Next to Gomez in the midfield, Scott, we saw Miguel Pallardo, La Tanqueta, from the start for the first time. How did you feel he performed?
I think he'll fit in perfectly in this country. He knows when to leave the foot in. Which is going to work out well for Saturday, I think. And also he's like Gomez, he's very brave on the ball, decent distribution, bar maybe one or two wayward passes towards the end of the game. But yeah, I thought he played well enough to suggest that you would have thought he'd actually been in that side for the last few months. He didn't look like somebody that was making his first start.
Ross, did you or did you not get a wee bit worried when he seemed to kick the ground before the ball with his first two passes of the game?
Well, it wasn't just that as well. There was some of his, even his passing, there was a couple of cross-field balls that, for some reason, it's just the way he hit it, his technique, it just looked very strange, but it seemed to come off. I mean, there was a few wayward balls here and there, and he lost the ball.
In other words, we're not used to seeing anyone with technique. I think that was the problem.
Yeah, maybe that's possibly the answer, but I mean, the way he done it, it just looked very strange. But don't get me wrong, solid player, 90 minutes. Where can he's a player we can throw in there without any problems at all. And obviously we'll be missing Gomez in a couple of weeks. Pallardo straight in, no problems whatsoever.
Okay, following on from the subject of players who potentially grew out of Saturday's game, if a player ever needed to score an important winner, it was Soufiane El Hasnaoui. Due to injuries, he was forced to play up front on his own again. Is he starting to grow into the role of lone striker in that system?
There were signs. You can tell what he's wanting to do. Like, he's obviously got a decent footballing brain, but a lot of it hasn't been coming off for him previous weeks. There were signs, especially in the first half, where he was linking pretty well with Blabin and Walker and King, and he seemed to find decent pockets of space behind the Falkirk backline as well on occasion. He could have had a goal in the first 10-15 minutes, and I thought it was definitely more encouraging. I still think there's a chance there that him and So could prove to be quite a decent partnership if both are fit and on form.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Scott in terms of him up front on his own. I don't think it's a long-term plan that we can stick to. It was because of the injuries that happened.
Yeah.
And as Darren mentioned last week, the setup of our team was in preparation of maybe against Rangers we might play that system again. Hopefully So's back, because he is a good player. He's shown ability. Maybe his drive is not as much there as other players, I would say, but I think that'll come. It's just a different style of play he's got to get used to, and he has mentioned that previously. In terms of the speed of the game here, he's got to get used to that.
I think he's a wee bit similar to the conversation that we've been having on an ongoing basis with Connor about Danny handling, when we've said about how handling sometimes will just disappear for 20 minutes,
yes,
and then he'll come back in and he'll get involved. And sometimes a player that plays that number 10 position, despite wearing number 9 on his back for some reason, when you play that number 10 position, it can actually be a strength to disappear for 15 minutes, because the defenders kind of forget you're even there. They start to stop worrying about you, and then you pick it up in a dangerous area and you hurt them because you've drifted out that much that everyone has switched off to the threat that you carry. I think there's maybe an element of that with El Hasnaoui, but that threat is completely blunted when he's playing as an out-and-out number 9. You need him to be involved at all times, otherwise you look toothless up front, or you're too reliant on midfielders carrying the ball 40 yards into their penalty area, which we saw a few times where Billy King ran 35 yards and for some reason didn't really seem to fancy a shot, and there was just nothing there for him really. We ended up trying to play the acutest of through balls that were just never going to come
It's like watching
off.
Sam Nicholson as well. kind of the way he played. Exactly the same. It was like, oh, I'm going to go this way. Oh, I've been forced this way around the box, but that led to the goal. So
yeah, we saw that. Yeah, with Jamie Walker. Jamie Walker to me looked absolutely desperate to cut inside, and just it got closed off, and he tried to come inside again. And now you're definitely not coming in. All right, well I better just hit the byline and set up a goal. Then it was really weird. Right, the final thing I want to touch on in terms of the Falkirk game was another change to the defence with Kevin McHattie coming in, at least relatively successfully given his goal. How did we feel that back four functioned as a unit?
It was a typical McHattie performance. He was great going forward, but for me there's still question marks at the back. If you could get a mix of him and Eckersley, you'd have a superb left back, but unfortunately both have sort of frailties in terms of Eckersley. Going forward maybe isn't quite as direct as McHattie, and McHattie positionally at left back still causes me problems when I'm watching him. In terms of the rest of the team, McKay was fine. Ozturk's actually looked more solid when Wilson hasn't been in the team.
Is that a Wilson thing or a goal at Easter Road thing?
It's got nothing to do with Wilson. It could be a mix of the confidence coming for the 2 goals, and also maybe him just feeling that McKay needs someone to actually talk him through a game, so maybe it's coming through that. McGee again, very solid defensively, no problems with him playing right back on Saturday at all. And yeah, Alexander, again just took everything fine. No fault at the goal. Wasn't really any fault of any Hearts player at the goal either. It was a half decent turn and finish for the Falkirk player, so there's not really anything you can pinpoint.
Ross, do you agree with that? Because I disagree with that. I think Jordan McGee was at fault for the goal. I thought he was static.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I think he dove in too early. And if you look back at the goal, you can even see Ozturk gesturing to him to get goal side of him, but he didn't. He slid in way too early for Malik, and yes, the was it baby?
I'm glad you're trying to say it.
They've decided to go with Biabe, but
he slipped
before it was hyphenated and it was two separate words.
He slipped to mishit it. It was very close to the goal, which the keeper can do nothing about that. But I do believe that McGee was at fault. That he should have cleared that.
But he's still done enough to secure his position for the
in terms of the back four. I've been mentioning it every week now. I think McHattie should be the first choice left back. I've wanted him in the team for quite a while. I think though, if you're playing Jamie Walker down the left, I'd rather have Eckersley just for the cover. But in terms of the way it was set up, McHattie was definitely needed as a more attacking force. We are a better attacking side with him in the team. There's no doubt about it. When Jamie Walker kind of cuts inside, there's always someone on the left there. And McHattie's goal was great. He didn't look at the goal, fair enough. He just turned and hit it. But I'm absolutely delighted for him. That will give him more confidence.
Okay, before we get into the Rangers game, because I can feel it brewing under there, we'll move on to Hibs and then we'll come back to the previews. Mikey, I think at your request we're going to keep this relatively brief. A frustrating affair by all accounts on Saturday. Did it add to the frustration that there was an opportunity to gain on Rangers, or is that secondary at this stage?
I think it's fine on the hindsight of it now. It was just disappointing to not capitalise on a relatively consistent run, and again we're not getting over this psychological barrier at Easter Road. Even some of the draws we've had recently, we've been creating a bucket load of chances and been guilty of missing them. We still created some chances on Saturday, but there wasn't the same volume of them. I think with the personnel that were injured, he's gone back to maybe more of a traditional 4-man midfield with the 2 wide players that has again proven not really to be our strongest area, especially when we have 2 wingers in the park and we've got a 5'8" centre forward and we try to stick crosses on his head. We've had a 6'2" centre forward at the start of the season that we've not been able to make use of properly. So going to the wide players and having that sort of natural width didn't really work for us. Handling does want to drop off the striker, and then Cummins in the box on his own an awful lot to really have a chance to do any damage.
Right, before we start playing the blame game then, because we will get into it, I'm going to force you into it. It's important to acknowledge that Hibs were fairly depleted at the weekend. Did that have a massive impact on proceedings, or should they still have had enough to get a win out the game?
Both. It did have a huge impact because we had to change the shape. Although I don't know if we had to, but he took the option to change the shape. We had a lot of guys on the bench, someone like Stanton perhaps, who could have come in, played
Slotted
next to
into
Allen
that
in a
three-man
little bit more
midfield.
of a kind of diamond shaped midfield again. But there still should be enough in the tank to beat a Queen of the South team that were without quite a number of players. They were without some of their first team players. I think it shows that Stubbs has managed to improve the team, but the squad is weaker than it was. Once we get past that sort of first 11, 12 players, there's not a great deal that's coming in and having an impact. It has certainly improved the general options we have to start the game, but when they disappear, we're down to the guys that kind of let us down last season. So I think that's something that will obviously require a bit of attention during January. But overall, I think that the performance was lacking a wee bit of inspiration. We got sussed out pretty easily by a somewhat makeshift Queen of the South side, who came and did what most of the smaller sides have done this season, and just realised that we're relatively one-dimensional when we play with a traditional kind of four with a wide midfield, and they close us down.
After the game, Alan Stubbs said it's by no means the players' fault that we haven't got the result today. Does that mean that some of the blame, or maybe more so than normal, lies at his door?
Perhaps he's taking that on his shoulders with that comment. He either that or he's maybe hinting towards the injuries, but hopefully he's acknowledging that maybe he made the wrong call on the personnel that were put in the team, and changing a system that was working for us without facing an opposition that perhaps required us to change the system in the way that we've had to change it to play Rangers at Ibrox and things like that. I think maybe he's taken on board that, you know what, I've perhaps made the wrong call this week, whether it's sort of not playing two guys up front again like he has done with Cummins and Malonga. So if he's doing that, then fair enough to him. It's good that he's taking that, protecting the players sort of kind of outwardly to the fans, and very quickly, like by the end of the match, he acknowledged that he's got it wrong. I'd rather it was that than somebody who didn't have the sort of foresight to go, well, this isn't gone right, and isn't aware that he's perhaps fallible.
Could I be devil's advocate?
Or he was just blaming it on injuries.
Could I be devil's advocate and just maybe suggest that he's maybe having a slight pop at the board? Because they have been left quite depleted, and he's now being left to rely on guys like Sinclair and Kennedy, who unfortunately, you know, guys like that you bring in that are 19, little to no first team experience. It's hard bringing in players of that ilk on loan and expecting them to play consistently well in a team that are, you know, most fans would like to think anyway, are going to challenge at the top end of the league the whole season. And I think maybe, I'm not saying, you know, he's totally frustrated with what's going on behind the scenes, but maybe things just now and again, you know, when he's left, we having to play a 19-year-old in goals with Alan Coombe as his reserve goalkeeper, and he's having to rely on guys like Kennedy and Sinclair on loan, and, you know, playing Cummins up front on his own. He's maybe is bemoaning the lackey funds that have maybe came in since he was offered the job in the first place.
Possible. I genuinely don't think that was the route he was going down. He's known since probably day one that there wasn't exactly a large pot for him to sort of rake him out in. And but he signed Kennedy, he started the first few games.
Yeah.
So I think and he's worked with him, he knows what he's about. So I think something like Kennedy, for example, he brought in probably with the anticipation of him being one of his starters, and it's not quite worked out that way.
There was actually an interview with Kennedy that I read over the last couple of days where he was saying that he's actually spoken with Stubbs, and Stubbs is incredibly positive about his contribution so far, but that he feels he's a winger, and they were leaking goals left, right and centre in a 4-4-2, and he essentially just had to be sacrificed to try and get some solidity at the system.
Harris kind of had to take that on the chin based on the shape we're playing, and recent results, while still not phenomenal, have sort of improved dramatically from where they were at the start of the season. So it's hard to say that Stubbs got that part of it wrong, but I think he did certainly get it wrong on Saturday with the change in shape. I think we have the personnel that we still could have produced a sort of some kind of replica of that sort of diamond shape we've had previously. But yeah, it was key players that were out. You know, McGeoch and Robertson, goalkeeper was out, but we kept a clean sheet, so it's not really sort of hampered us much. And then Malonga was on international duty, so there were guys who have been making a difference to the last sort of 6-7 performances who weren't there.
Okay, couple of final points on Hibs then. Paul Heffernan came in again to at least sort of replace Malonga, and missed arguably Hibs' best chance of the game. In his post-match press conference, Alan Stubbs said 8 times out of 10 Hef scores that. Those must be the 8 times that are happening in training, because none of them are happening at Easter Road at the moment. Is it yet another missed opportunity for Heffernan? Literally. Is his opportunity, has it now gone?
To be honest, until El Alagouy's fit, probably not. I think we're stuck with them would be an unfair turn of phrase, but
I would say that
we're still going to have to face the fact that he's going to be part of the squad until January, and then perhaps reviewing when El Alagoui is going to be fit.
I think you're just hoping that Cummins or Stubbs is not saying to Cummins, this is the player you want to look up to. This is the experience that you want to, take under your wing. You want to take Cummins under your wing.
No, to be fair, I didn't think
misses. It maybe is taking too much of a sort of influence off of him.
I don't know if Cummins has got the humility to accept guidance from any individual. To be fair,
he's got his Zlatan DVD out watching Zlatan's best of to sort of replicate a bit of that.
He'll be taking Heffernan under his angel wing.
To be fair though, I think that's that type of attitude is what Hibs have missed. They need someone like that.
Since the sort of Scott Brown days where he went to the centre midfield.
I think Harris could do with half of Cummins' confidence. There's definitely a player that's, just bottles it out every 50-50 challenge since he came back with that injury. He looks half the player. That's been kind to him, I think.
Big question marks over Harris at the moment.
Okay, on the positive side, before we wrap up on Hibs and move on to the preview of the weekend then, Perntrew, is that what we're going with?
I think we'll go with that.
A 19-year-old goalkeeper made his debut and was fairly untroubled.
Yeah.
How pleasing is it that Stubbs seems to be establishing some stability at the back, even when you're having to change personnel fairly regularly?
It's been really important. I think that he's kind of come under the radar, but I think Fontaine's made a big difference. He just does the kind of traditional centre-half things really, really well. We've been happy with Gray since day one. Stevenson seems to have gotten a good run of form, although he was a bit more disappointing going forward at the weekend. His delivery wasn't what it had been early in the season when he sort of racked up quite a few assists, but we do have that sort of stable base now where we can be relatively confident that we're not going to be shipping either goals to the smaller sides or like a lot of goals in the bigger matches. So that's important. It's good that we've exposed this younger guy to a bit of permanent football, given that Oxley may well end up back at Hull in January on depending on their injury situation. We played a couple of times in pre-season. I think folk were a little bit sort of ropey about him, but came out, took his crosses, had a bit of a presence about him, so that was quite a relief, given that there's not really been much word as to when Oxley's going to be available again. So I think we've got quite stable, and every option that's come in seems to have made a contribution at some point, whether it be left back, right back, centre half, so that's less of a worry.
Okay, final question on Hibs, and this is a quick hit answer one, because it just interested me with this. As Scott said, there is a real struggle in the Hibs squad at the moment, coping with the injury crisis that's hit, whereas there are other squads that are potentially better set up to cope with those. In terms of January, which is now relatively close, we're talking 6 weeks away, what's the biggest priority for January in terms of Stubbs? What's first on his list, either in terms of squad depth or in terms of necessity to the starting 11? Which position?
I think that it's got to be a centre forward, because we're creating chances, we're definitely not taking enough of them. There's potential in Cummins, absolutely. Malonga's played well the majority of the time that he's played. He does have his wee spells where he'll sort of not do much. He looks a bit lethargic at times, but he's scoring goals. It's all I think the key thing with that for me is depending on when we're thinking El Alagoui is going to come back. Yeah. There's a couple of young guys in their 20s just now who are scoring quite a few goals, who could perhaps come into it as substitute options, to give them a game and see what they're all about. But if El Alagoui is looking like March, April, then I think a striker is crucial. If not, another central midfielder similar in style to McGeoch and Allen, who are happy with the ball at their feet, who will take the ball and challenge the opposition, make them make mistakes almost, because beyond those two guys at the weekend showed we don't have another that type of midfielder. It comes to Craig, it comes to bringing wingers onto the park. So I think that El Alagouy's injury will play a big factor. If he's going to be a while, I really think we need a striker. If not, then we need another midfielder who's going to take some of the heat, if you like, off at Allen and McGeoch.
Okay, either way,
it wasn't as quite short as you're after, but
either way, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And with that in mind, it will be interesting to see how the weekend plays out. Let's do relatively quick on Hibs. We'll stay on Hibs for the time being. Dumbarton away. Are you filled with hope? Sharp and take a breath.
I'm not going to say we're going to get beat, but it's one of these games where if we go out and if we play this 4-4-2 again with the white players, I don't know how I feel about it.
Vital to get a couple of bodies back in the midfield.
Absolutely, I think if we get Robertson fit, he's come into a game the last few weeks significantly. He's allowed the guys in front of him to go on and play much more. He keeps the momentum going in that position as well. We have talked again about Craig in the past, how he slows it down a little bit. I think if he plays slightly further forward next to Allen rather than behind him, the onus is on him to be a bit more attacking. So if we can get Robertson back and get Craig and Allen playing the kind of two central midfield roles, McGeoch looks like he's going to be a few weeks, so we're going to have to come up with a solution to that. But if we can get back to that narrower midfield, get the full-backs bombing on much more, then I think we'll win.
Score prediction?
Go 2-1. If we go with the wingers, then 0-0 again.
Okay, right, Mikey, we're going to keep you involved here because this is a big game. It affects the whole table. It will affect Hibs' outlook on the rest of the season as well. Boys, what do we think about Tynecastle at 12:45 on Saturday?
Well, I'm afraid it's not going to be as easy as some Hearts fans, reckon it's going to be. I do feel that, providing we play the way that we played on Saturday, we press the game, we make sure we don't get involved in any sort of nastiness that might end up sort of flaring up in the first 20 minutes, because I think some of Rangers' more experienced players will try and...
McCulloch.
Yes. Good old Elbows McCulloch will probably be trying his best to get a reaction out of some of our players. I think it's best that we don't react to that, because there was one or two incidents on Saturday. Osturk, when the elbow incident with El Hashnui in the first half. In a Rangers game, that could potentially turn into a red card. Although I don't think he done anything wrong. With the wrong referee, you don't know what could happen in this sort of game. In terms of how the team sets up, I'd like to see obviously Wilson and So come back into the side, and Nicholson. I'd like to see Walker and King dropped and Mackay dropped. I'd like to see probably El Hashnui playing out wide, because I think it's good to have just a little bit more physical edge in there when you're playing Rangers, and I think he'll give us that, where King has been a little bit off the boil recently, and sometimes in these sort of matches does tend to come in and out of the game a little bit more. So providing we start the game well, good tempo to the match, I think it'll be 2-1 Hearts.
Ross, Scott is wielding the axe.
Yeah, I mean, you'll need to throw water over me after I've said this as well, but I think we should take a leaf out of Hibs' book. The way they set up against Rangers, I know it was at Ibrox, but it seemed to be the blueprint of how to beat Rangers. It was everything, absolutely everything in that game meant that they got the best result. The last game at Ibrox, we did well to get that. Obviously, it was a last-minute goal from So, and hopefully he's back. I would agree partially with Scott's changes. I think Walker needs to come out of the team. I would put Nicholson back in for King as well. I wouldn't put El Hashnui on the wing, but I can see his thinking there in terms of the physicality, because it is going to be quite a physical game, I can imagine. I do like the midfield three that we had against Falkirk. I think we need to keep that as well. I know Boabin went off against Falkirk, but it doesn't look too serious. So I can see the three of them interchanging again. And in terms of how they're going to set up, I think they've got a lot more to worry about from us than we've got to worry about from them. I really do. I've said that in the past, and if you were to put both squads in front of me, I'd pick Hearts squad all day. And we've got a solid defence if Wilson comes back. I would keep McHattie in there as well if Walker goes out. So I agree, absolutely 100% agree with the scoreline as well. I think 2-1 Hearts.
I could script what Rangers are going to do if that helps. They'll play for an hour with Boyd, he'll do nothing, then they'll throw in Daly, and then they'll go long ball for the next half an hour.
Such a bold statement. He will do nothing for an hour. Patrick.
Never.
To be fair, that I'm not convinced that they'll go long ball after an hour. That long diagonal from either fullback seems to be plan A. It certainly was against Hibs. I mean, it's such a basic tactic, but there is a minor worry that comes with that, because it always hurts more when you concede goals to that basic a tactic. And to be fair, that's how the goal at Ibrox came. A big hoof from Lee Wallace, and we got a wee bit. Ozturk got drawn out of position by McCulloch's dropping to the edge of the box, and we kind of lost that a wee bit. How big is the concern in terms of that chaotic style that they'll try and bring, just lumping it at us and trying to get as many bodies in there as possible? How much of a concern is there if Wilson is not fit, that we may not be as...
I don't know, because Mackay's actually, if you're going to put Mackay in for one reason, it is to win balls in the air.
So what about the positional sense, though? Do you worry about him getting dragged out of position or knocking off concentration wise?
Not so much. I think Brad Mackay's potentially got the makings to be a decent centre half. I think last season was a hard first season for him. He was playing alongside McGowan, who, unfortunately I didn't think was quite good enough to make it at Hearts, but due to obvious reasons was playing most weeks. And as you can see with Mackay this season, I know we're in a league lower, but he definitely looks like he's came onto a game playing alongside Wilson and obviously Ozturk the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'd put McGee at centre back, just for the simple reason that
Patterson coming back in at right back.
Patterson right back, McGee centre back. Just for the simple reason that I think the bigger games, I don't know if it's just me, but McGee seems to thrive on when he's got pressure on him. When he comes in, it seems to be because of an injury. It's not something where he's okay, you're starting, unless it was against Alloa. But I think that he can do well in this type of game, and I think it'll harden him up a bit. He's good in the ball, he's a football player. He can get forward when needed. Maybe a bit of work in the air.
I think the big question there, in terms of a straight choice between Brad Mackay or Jordan McGee, is what game plan we are going for. If we are going to try and get on the ball and dominate possession, then Jordan McGee is the one to go with, because if they man-mark Gomez or put two men on Gomez, what we've seen is that we need both.
He'll be fine.
No, but what we've seen is that sometimes it is useful for us to have both centre-halves capable of walking out and just doing Gomez's job. We've seen Ozturk do it a lot now, stride out an extra 10-15 yards and just play the passes Gomez was playing, and then it takes the coverage away from Gomez again. Danny Wilson has come up with a couple of assists as well, doing the same thing. Jordan McGee's far more equipped to do that than Brad Mackay is. That's the one big weakness I think you were still alluding to in his game, Scott, is that Brad Mackay's still not really a football player. He's a defender in the Scottish sense of it. So I think it really is that thing. If we're going to monopolise the ball and try and get 65% possession in this game, then Jordan McGee plays. If we're going to go a wee bit more toe-to-toe with them and think, well, we are confident that we are more potent, so you can attack and we can attack, then maybe Brad Mackay is the one there from a defensive perspective to just head everything away and try and muscle Boyd out of it as much as possible.
It all depends on what you want to do at the full-back position as well. It depends where Rangers play with any width. I don't think they will. I think they're actually going to try and match Hearts free against free in the midfield. It'll probably be McLeod, Law, Black against
the problem I think
Gomez,
they've got
Bardo and Blabin.
They've no actual right midfielder.
Yeah.
So they've got left wingers who they sometimes try and play down the right, but it's Templeton and Aird and guys like that who actually like to do what Walker does and cut inside all the time, which takes your width away. So I think you're right, our fullbacks actually might find themselves with very little to do in terms
I think
of...
in that sense it'll probably be good to have McCarthy in the team on Saturday and have someone supporting Nicholson. I always think Nicholson and McCarthy link up fairly well going forward. On the other side, I'm not quite sure if Paterson's... I mean, was it a free match suspension?
That's what I thought. But everyone else seems to be assuming that he's available, so I'm going
sure
with
at
that
the time
logic,
of the red card it was mentioned that it was going to be free matches.
I thought
I might be
well.
wrong. If that's the case, obviously clearly McGee will start, but I would probably keep McGee in there anyway. I think McGee in these sort of situations has got more of a level head than Callum sometimes has, and Callum's having a great experience this week with the Scotland team, and if he is suspended, then I've got no problems at all with McGee starting at right back.
I think, just to sort of chip in from sort of the Hibs perspective, is I think if he's available, I think you need to go with Patterson, you need to go with McCarthy, because the game that Hibs had at Ibrox, all three of our goals involved our two fullbacks.
Gray was absolutely
right up the park.
Unreal that
Gray
night.
was just up and down. Stevenson's got 2 assists for the
Yep.
game, one of them for Gray's header inside the 6-yard box. So I don't think, because of you're talking about that kind of issue they've got with like wide players and who really plays out wide, I don't think they know how to play against width that comes from so deep. Their fullbacks know how to play against wingers, but does like the midfield know how to play against really attacking fullbacks? And I think that's where a lot of joy could come for Hearts, especially when a lot of the great play this season's come from the attacking wide players. If it gives them licence to cut inside much more and occupy the Rangers centre halves. If McHatty's right up the park, if Patterson's right up the park, and you've still got that shield that's provided by Gomez, Bob and Payardo if he plays. But I think that's going to be hugely important, and I think they need to sort of be as positive as they can in that position and not go with the kind of instinct of, is McHattie going to be vulnerable to that high diagonal ball and bring Eckersley back in? I would just stick with them and play in a pure attacking sense. I just don't see how, this is pure painful to say, but I can't see how Rangers are going to, first of all, stop Hearts for 90 minutes with the way they've been playing recently if they really go all out attack, but also Rangers still just don't look that creative, and they're relying heavily on Lewis McLeod, but because he's their main guy, if you've got these 3 guys in the centre of the park for Hearts, one of them will just go, if you go to the toilet, I'm going with you, mate. Like, just follow them all day long, and that really closes off a lot of what they've got on the side.
Yeah, I'm hoping they come out and attack us. I think that suits us. It'll give our wide areas, whoever's playing in there, a lot more joy. I would put Patterson in there as well, just to simply mark McCulloch at the set pieces as well. I think we need strength in there, and Patterson's the best at it in our team. Maybe him and Mackay, but I'd put Patterson ahead of him definitely. So I see a lot of joy coming from this game, and hopefully we can pull off the result. I don't think it's going to be as easy as obviously we're thinking it is, but I still see us grinding out a result here.
Mikey, as the nominated Hibs representative on Monday Night Football, what do you think the score's going to be?
I think that it'll be, I'm going to burn for saying this, 2-0 Hearts.
Right.
2-0, God.
Interestingly, what would you like the score to be? What is the best result from a Hibs perspective?
That was a booking gesture there. For the best for Hibs is a Hearts win, because I still think the Hearts are now too far away from us, unless there's some absolutely horrific collapse that we at the same time go on some astounding 17 match like sort of consecutive victories. I think the Hearts are already out of touch, so we now need to focus on getting Rangers back towards us. So yeah, Hearts to win is what we really need, and I don't think any sort of sensible minded Hibs fans going to sit there and go, it's always fun seeing Rangers get beat and it's going to have a benefit to us, so let's just get past the fact that the other side wears maroon and go Hearts win.
It's official again then. Edinburgh is United come 1:15.
Yeah, for an hour and a half.
Aye, that's true. But then, how much did we enjoy it last time we were United? That was different class. So hopefully it has.
Connor was bouncing off the walls.
Hopefully it has the same result this time. That would be very sweet. Scott, as the resident booker for the show and kickback favourite this week. Sorry, that's an in-joke. Check out Scott's thread on kickback about his most respected Hibs 11 to see some rather creative insult.
I think there was one guy who was actually threatening to take away his direct debit from the foundation. I offended him that much.
Scott is trying to destroy Hearts with his comments.
Slightly tongue-in-cheek, but yeah, it was quite funny.
We told Gary Halliday that he would regret ever getting involved in the show. It's cost you 10 quid, Gary, already. Scott, what have we got lined up for next week's show?
Well, we've actually got great Hearts tannoy man Scott Wilson will be with us, and respected Evening News journalist Barry Anderson as well will be joining us to talk over the Hearts Rangers game.
Great. So we will have loads of reaction next week with the voice of Hearts and the voice of the Evening News with so we'll have loads of reaction next week. We won't forget Hibs as well. They will definitely be covered in there. Hopefully a win against Dumbarton, and then Ali McCoist's job will be in severe jeopardy if Hearts
Oh,
get the
hope
result.
not. Let's hope not.
Let's see if we get the contract extension.
That's the other side of the
Still
coin.
can't afford to pay him off, so it's fine.
But the interesting thing is that Mike Ashley might front up a wee loan to pay him off, but then Mike Ashley's hiring the manager, so it's not exactly guaranteed to be a success.
Dennis Wise. Guaranteed.
Would you
Joking here, would
Joking
just be
here.
the best. He's got contacts all over the world of football, don't you know?
Doesn't Joe Keenan regard himself as Irish though? That could be controversial.
What I want to know is, would any Hearts fan, knowing that a Hearts victory would mean Ali McCouse is out of a job, would they take a draw?
Possibly.
I don't know. I'm not worried about who they pick to come next, so no, I would like a win. On that note, we will leave you for another week. Check us out on iTunes if you want to re-listen to the interview with Danny, or our ramblings, or our confidence about the game after Hearts. Hopefully not.
Yes.
Yeah. After the game at the weekend, you can listen back and see how wrong, or hopefully how right we were. Thank you for joining us for another week. Check out the blog at WordPress, mondaynightfootball.wordpress.com. There we go, got there eventually. We will have some new blogs up for you soon, and if you would like to contribute, get in touch with us on the facebook.com/Monday Night Football or at MN Football on Twitter. Thanks very much for joining me, guys. We will see you next week.
One hours.